Title: The Sound of Rain. It was a warm summer evening when Arav and his younger sister, Nina, sat on the porch of their small house, watching the horizon turn orange and pink. Their home was nestled in a quiet village, surrounded by fields, where the days were slow and the nights silent except for the hum of crickets. Rain had been missing for months, and the parched fields whispered of desperation. The crops were failing, the wells were drying, and with every passing day, their father's face grew more lined with worry. Arav was 16, old enough to understand the gravity of their situation. Their father worked tirelessly on the land, hoping for a miracle, while their mother quietly rationed what little food and water they had left. Nina, only 10, remained blissfully unaware of the severity of their plight. She still laughed as she played with her handmade kite, still sang songs to herself as she braided wildflowers into crowns. Arav envied her innocence, but also felt the weight of responsibility to protect it. One evening, as they sat on the porch, Nina asked, "Do you think the rain will come soon, Arav?" Arav didn't know how to answer. He looked at her hopeful eyes and lied. "Of course, Nina. The rain always comes." Nina smiled and said, "When it rains, let's play outside until we're soaked. Promise me, okay?" "Promise," Arav replied, though his heart ached at the thought that his promise might be empty. The days dragged on, the sun relentless. Their father began talking about selling the little land they had left. Arav overheard his parents whispering at night about debts and hunger. He hated the helplessness that consumed him. One afternoon, while wandering near the dried-up riverbed, Arav spotted a travelling merchant resting under a tree. The man had a cart full of trinkets, fabrics, and jars of coloured powders. But what caught Arav's eye was a small brass flute lying among the wares. Nina had always wanted a flute. She often talked about learning to play music and how she could one day fill the silent nights with melodies. "How much for the flute?" Arav asked, his voice cautious. The merchant eyed him. 3 silver coins. Arav's heart sank. He didn't have any money, but as he looked at the flute, an idea formed in his mind. That evening, while the rest of the family was asleep, Arav quietly slipped out of the house. He carried with him a small pouch containing his most precious possessions, a pocket knife his grandfather had given him, a wooden pendant his mother had carved, and a handful of polished stones he had collected over the years. He returned to the merchant, offering the pouch. "Will this be enough for the flute?" The merchant examined the items carefully. Finally, he nodded and handed Arav the flute. "A good trade, boy," he said with a smile. Arav clutched the flute tightly, a mix of relief and excitement coursing through him. He couldn't wait to see Nina's face when he gave it to her. The next morning, Arav presented the flute to Nina. Her eyes lit up with joy as she held it, her fingers tracing its smooth surface. "It's beautiful," she exclaimed. "Thank you, Arav." She tried to play it, though she could only produce a few awkward notes. But it didn't matter. The sound of the flute, however clumsy, brought a rare moment of happiness to their home. Every evening after that, Nina would sit on the porch and play the flute, her melodies growing better with each passing day. The neighbours often stopped by to listen, and for a while the music seemed to chase away the heaviness that hung over the village. One night, as Nina played a soft tune, dark clouds began to gather in the sky. A cool breeze swept through the fields, carrying with it the scent of rain. Arav and Nina looked up, their eyes wide with hope. Moments later, the first drops began to fall, slowly at first, then faster, until the rain came pouring down, drenching the dry earth. Nina laughed and ran into the fields, spinning with her arms outstretched. "Arav! Come on!" she shouted. Arav hesitated, then ran after her. They played in the rain, their laughter mixing with the sound of water hitting the ground. For the first time in months, the world felt alive again. The rain didn't stop that night, nor the next day. The fields began to drink deeply, and the rivers slowly filled. The village was saved. But Nina fell ill a few days later. Her small body, already weakened by months of scarce food, couldn't fight off the fever that came with the sudden change in weather. Arav stayed by her side, holding her hand as she shivered and coughed. "You promised we'd play in the rain," she whispered one evening, her voice faint. "And we did," Arav said, forcing a smile. "Play the flute for me," she said. Arav took the flute and played the only melody he knew, a tune she had taught him. As the notes filled the room, Nina closed her eyes, a peaceful smile on her lips. She never opened them again. The rain continued for weeks, bringing life back to the village. But for Arav, the sound of rain would always carry the memory of Nina's laughter, her music, and the quiet promise he had made and kept. Even years later, when he sat by the fields watching the monsoon clouds roll in, he could still hear her flute in the rhythm of the rain.